Year 2, and welcome to day 6 of our unit on Somebody Swallowed Stanley. For this lesson, you are going to need your idea sheet from Friday, paper or the book that you do your work in, and a pencil and a rubber. So on Friday's lesson, we drew the part of the story where the seagull tries to swallow Stanley, and then more seagulls come to try to swallow him. So this is the first page that we drew early last week, and then we flip it. And then this is the whale scene, and then flip it again, and then this is the seagull scene. So this is my colored in version from the one that we did on Friday. We also wrote down some useful vocabulary that we want to include in our writing today. So today we're going to carry on with what we wrote on Thursday. So let's reread what we have written so far.
Hi, my name's Stanley. As you can see, I'm a kite, but I haven't always been a kite. In fact, my life has been pretty crazy. Let me tell you all about it. It all started on a scorching summer's afternoon. I was at the beach filled to bursting with crisps, strawberries, and watermelon. My family emptied me and put me on the side of the picnic blanket. Without warning, a beach ball came whizzing past. It knocked into me and carried me away from the blanket. Whoosh! Suddenly a strong breeze blasted across the sandy beach and carried me to the sea. I don't know how long I bobbed on the surface for. A week maybe? Eventually, when I was in the middle of the deep, dark ocean, I sank down, down, down. After several days of being completely alone, I floated past a school of fish as colourful as a rainbow. Then something terrible happened. Somebody swallowed me. I was so scared, but I tried to be brave. I tried to be brave as I was being dragged through the creature's bristly baleen. I tried to be brave as I went into the creature's vast mouth. Before I knew it, the huge beast began coughing and spluttering. Whoosh! I burst through a spout and went flying for miles. I was so relieved. Now, we are going to write a sentence about how Stanley goes from floating in the air to bobbing on the surface of the ocean.
We're going to start a new paragraph because this is a new part of our story. So we want to write a sentence about how Stanley goes from floating in the air to going onto the surface of the water. So I'm going to say I fell down, I floated down, I dropped down onto the surface of the sea. Actually, I want to add in an adjective in front of the word sea. Now, if it's a really sunny day and the sun is shining on the water, sometimes it looks like the water is shimmering. So I'm going to add in the word shimmering. I dropped down onto the surface of the shimmering sea with a what kind of sound would a bag make if it fell onto the water? Be splash? With a splash. Where if he's on the surface of the water and the water is really wavy, what's that action called? Maybe bobbed? He bobbed up and down. Where I bobbed up and down in the waves. Okay, so you're going to pause the video now to write a sentence about how Stanley got from the air onto the surface of the water. And when you start the video again, we are going to write a sentence about what Stanley might be thinking to himself. So now we're going to write a sentence about what Stanley might be thinking to himself. So we're going to look at our ideas page, and we wrote down that at this point in the story, Stanley was feeling relaxed, he was feeling calm, and he was feeling carefree. So if you were feeling this way, if you were feeling carefree and relaxed and calm, what might you be saying to yourself? If you're floating along, you're bobbing along in the waves, and the warm sun is shining on your face, what might you be thinking to yourself? So Stanley might be thinking, I could stay like this forever. I could stay like this forever. I thought to myself. Right, as you can see, I made a mistake here. I originally wrote down, I could stay like this forever, Stanley thought to himself. Now, extra challenge, why do you think what mistake did I make there? Remember, we're writing it from the perspective of Stanley, so I had to change it to this version. I could stay like this forever, I thought to myself. So you're going to pause the video now to write a sentence about what Stanley might be thinking to himself. Remember, you have to write, I thought to myself. Don't make the same mistake that I did. Okay, so what two sentences are repeated in the book every time Stanley gets swallowed by a different animal? The two sentences are, then something terrible happened. Somebody swallowed me. We're going to make a little change to those sentences now because the seagulls, the creatures that try to swallow Stanley next, don't actually swallow Stanley, but they try to. So we are going to write, then something terrible happened. Exclamation mark. Somebody tried to swallow me. Exclamation mark. It's really exciting. So you're going to pause the video now and you're going to write these two sentences. Then something terrible happened. Somebody tried to swallow me. We now want to say what the creature did with Stanley, but we also want to include a description of what the creature looks like. Because remember, in the book, the author doesn't really say exactly what creature swallows Stanley. We kind of find that out afterwards. So we're going to look at our idea sheet to see what we wrote down. So we have written down that the seagull had a sharp yellow beak. We wrote down its beak is as yellow as the sun, and the creature has small beady eyes. So I'm going to try to incorporate one of those into my sentence. So, same paragraph. The creature now the creature grabbed me out of the water. The creature pulled me out of the water, or plucked me out of the water, plucked me out of the water with, now what did the creature use to pluck Stanley out of the water? He used his beak. So the creature plucked me out of the water with his beak, which was as yellow as the sun, or with his sharp yellow beak. I'm going to use sharp yellow beak. The creature plucked me out of the water with his sharp, yellow beak. Remember, we use a comma in between two different adjectives. The creature plucked me out of the water with his sharp yellow beak. I actually want to add a bit more to that sentence. And then what did the creature do with Stanley? Kind of probably took him away and carried me away. You can be a bit more specific if you want. You can say where exactly the seagull, where the creature carried Stanley off to. So you're going to pause the video now to write your sentence. Remember to look at your idea sheet for some descriptions of what that creature looked like. So the seagull has now carried Stanley off and put him down somewhere. Now what does he do to Stanley now? So we wrote down 3 really good verbs, 3 really good doing words, action words, to explain what the seagulls did to Stanley. the seagulls nipped Stanley, snapped at Stanley, and then pecked at Stanley. And since there are 3 verbs, let's put that into a commas in a list sentence. When he put me down, when he put me down, he pecked at me. He pecked at me, comma, snapped at me, pecked at me, snapped at me, and pecked at me, snapped at me, and nipped at me. So you're going to pause the video now and you're going to write your commas in a list sentence. If you wrote down other ideas of other action words that the seagull did to Stanley, you can include those as well. So what happens next in the story? So after the one seagull tries to peck at Stanley and nip at him and snap at him, more seagulls come flying over to check Stanley out, and they go a bit crazy as seagulls normally do. So let's look at our idea sheet for words that we wrote down to describe the other seagulls that come. So those other seagulls were unruly and they were frenzied, which means a bit crazy. And they were flapping their wings and they were squawking. So let's try to include those words into a sentence. So we don't know how many extra seagulls came over, so we can just say several. Several more of these creatures. Several more of these creatures. Let's describe those creatures. Let's use 2 adjectives. We've included 2. Let's use unruly and frenzied. Several more of these unruly, now there's 2 adjectives, need a comma. Several more of these unruly, frenzied creatures came flapping, I'm gonna run out of space, flapping and squawking. Flapping and squawking over. Several more of these unruly, frenzied creatures came flapping and squawking over. And then what did they do to Stanley? And they were pecking at him, but we don't want to use that word again. They were probably pulling him. One bird would pull him, and the other would pull him, the other would pull him. And they pulled me this way and that way. So you're going to pause the video now and you're going to write a sentence about what the other seagulls did. And be sure to include some of the words that you wrote down on Friday. Now, the seagulls don't actually swallow Stanley. And we're going to start our last sentence with a time opener. So after a while, comma, they gave up and I was free at last. What kind of punctuation should go at the end of that sentence? Exclamation mark. So right now you're going to pause the video and you're going to write your very last sentence about how Stanley is free. And I've included some other time openers that you can use in your sentence. So you're going to reread your work now just to see if it all makes sense. And when you have done that, then you are done for today. See you later, guys. Bye.